Well, hey, this is Christian Buckley with CollabTalk, and I'm here with Paul. And Paul, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Paul Keijzers. I'm an Office Server and Services MVP. Only first year, so I hope to get a renewal in July. I'm passionate about Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, and lately I've been doing some development with Office 365 CLI from Waldeck, who is the owner of that. So I really like that.
Talking to him later this week as well. I've got with a bunch of things going on with the Rencore team. But I know, so Paul, you and I have known each other for a long time. You know, as I started traveling over to Europe for SharePoint Saturday events and things, kind of when did you get involved with those events?
My first conference was in 2009, and I think most of the current MVPs were at the SBC 09 in Las Vegas. And I definitely know almost everyone from that conference, which was really amazing.
Well, you know, and so as you know, I'm helping, do some promotion around the event that's coming up next month in May. So the SharePoint Conference North America. Are you making it over for that?
No, too bad. I cannot make it.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. But I think to your point, though, is that I have the same thing. It's like that event in 2009. That was right after I left Microsoft. So it was my first SharePoint. I've been to all of the SharePoint conferences, but that was the first one I was able to go and just kind of freely walk around and talk to people.
Yeah.
And so it's still the people that I interact with on a daily basis are some of the folks that I met at that event.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I started in the first 2001, the Lake Tahoe version, and then I went out in 2003. I just had other things to do. I came from a VBA perspective, so really office development. Then in 2007, I started with SharePoint 2007, lots of migrations from 2003 to 2007. And then 09 was really like the first time I saw people around me collaborating, and the community is so strong, and that's really beautiful to see.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. I was just sending out a couple invites for other video recordings, and it had a kind of a thread going back and forth talking about how it's been for a long time of this vibrant community, and for a lot of folks that say, look, there's just been nothing like this SharePoint community. And I've been in some other non-Microsoft communities, large communities in tech that have been very vibrant and strong, and I think very much like this. But certainly in the Microsoft ecosystem, there's nothing like this, quite like this. But but as far as your day to day, I mean, what are you doing around SharePoint today? Like, what's your job? How are you working with the technology?
Well, a lot of things are development from my perspective. I work for customers, implement their total intranet, provisioning engines, that kind of stuff. I do a lot for big clients, almost all 200 plus employees. Mm-hmm. So a lot of time I'm in Visual Studio Code, developing new things. I'm not working a lot with the SharePoint framework at this moment, but I hope I will, because we still see a lot of development going on in the classic sides. Although I want to go to the modern, they still need functionality, and I really feel like we should.
Yeah, that's I've actually got a blog post on that specific topic coming out. But yeah, I mean, you're right. My philosophy is, well, I'm sure you do something very similar with your clients, and is that, and I say that don't make a move forward based on whatever Microsoft or any other vendor is pitching, like latest, greatest, have it out there. Like, you have to have the business justification. You need to understand the cost, the time, the impact to change. And does that cost exceed the value of moving to the next version? I'm all for like the new stuff is exciting, but
yeah, I know. And another thing that a lot of people forget is try to get as much of SharePoint and Teams out of the box, and don't go develop before it's really, if you're like 80%, why do development for the 20%?
Says the consultant who's helping customize SharePoint for clients.
Of course, but you have to be real, and it's easy to develop, but once Microsoft moves, like, okay, now we are in Classic, but sometime maybe they say, okay, we stop with Classic, and then all development stuff is made for 100,000 euros or dollars, and it's gone. So think before you start.
Well, that's actually, it's a great point. I mean, as you know, you mentioned, Waldeck and what the Rencore team is doing, and their cloud analysis product, being able to go and understand what you even have in place before you move. And because that's part of it is a lot of organizations, and I don't know how much time you spend with your clients to just go back and, I don't know, even just kind of catalog, look, this is what you have. Here's what we're doing. Here will be the impact. I can go and build this for you, and it'll give you that functionality just so you understand here's where you could make it more difficult later.
Exactly. And that's, I think, one of the things people forget, and it takes a lot of time, but it will return your investment.
Well, having the catalog there, or?
No, just the talks with the clients, to do, what they have, and how to move forward. Well,
look, I mean, there's a kind of a deeper theme there around the. I say all the time that every project, every SharePoint initiative starts as a business analyst activity, because you have to have that conversation. And one, as a client, as a customer, you should never just take at face value what any vendor, whatever any consultant says. You should understand what it is that they're proposing to go and do and what the impacts are. Ask questions. It doesn't mean you're not going to move forward. It might be the best thing for you.
Exactly.
But you have to have that conversation, have that understanding. You can't go into it with your eyes closed and just understand what the impacts, because there's always an impact.
Yeah, definitely. And most people forget.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that, so this is kind of a broader topic, but kind of what are you most passionate about? I mean, what would you say that one topic is today? Because I know you're writing about a few different things that are out there. I mean, what really gets you excited?
Well, there are a few, especially Microsoft Teams. The guys are really working on to get the product right, and I see a lot of growth there. And another thing that is not people are not aware of is the user voice of Microsoft. Mm-hmm. It's I've seen some things people post in user voice, and a few weeks later they are in production, and that's something I think we have to push more as MVPs. To the people, that user voice is very important to Microsoft to get our product better, because we all use it.
I just had this conversation again with somebody who was out in DC last week for SharePoint Fest, and somebody asked a question, and it was brought up a couple times, and I think when the panel, some of the folks on the panel talked about user voice. But somebody asked the conversation just in the hall, says, well, how realistic is that to be out there? I mean, how often do you go and look at user voice? So I said, look, me as a non-developer, but I have certain topics that I follow. I'm in there probably 2-3 times a week, monitoring things, or I get email notifications of the changes of the updates, so that things that I go in there, I will go in and search for topics like, is this covered? I see this request, I agree, but is it something that's part of the roadmap that I'm just not aware of? And I'll go and do kind of a quick search. And then if I find it, I'll follow it. And then I get the email updates.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. And within Teams, we also, a lot of people forget, we have on the left side in Teams, we have a button for feedback. So if you have feedback, just push it, and don't be shy or don't think they will not listen, because they are listening.
Right. Well, that's, if you have I'll say this again, I feel like a broken record. I've said it in a number of these recordings, but if you are looking at something like a relatively new, it's a year old now at Teams, that's been since GA, or SharePoint or anything else, and you're finding that, if you're going in, like you're working with clients on customizing classic team sites, because there is just not parity yet with the functionality over in the cloud, or sorry, in modern
in Teams.
And if there's something specific to your business needs, you need to let Microsoft know. You need to go and post something out there.
Exactly.
Because you're right. It only takes like 5-10 people on an item for Microsoft to respond. It's not a high barrier.
No. And I think what I've seen, they look at it, I think 1-2 times a week, and they prioritize on the items that are on there. So, yeah, I think it's really important.
It used to be, when I was at Microsoft, one of the complaints from the community side of things, and I saw it and recognized this too, but would say that, look, if Microsoft personnel, developers, so the engineering side or marketing product side, are not being measured on their response to the community, then there's a serious disconnect. That there needs to be that measurement for employees, and I would say this is the case for, look, I'm the CEO of my own company, so it's built in. But as a consultant, as a product or marketing person, if you are even one step away from client being responsible for that, then there's a failure there. You're too far away from the pulse of what's actually happening. And I think and this is one of those changes with the new Microsoft, that there has been added to individual and organizational teams into their annual commitments, that community component. And that has dramatically changed how people respond and how responsive they are to feedback.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing that's also with user voice, for example, you have the tech community, which is really, I've been there since the beginning, September 2016. I thought, something like that. And I see that Microsoft is directly responding to questions people have, which is really powerful.
Right.
They see the need.
And that's going to be the primary channel for having those conversations. I tell people, look, that because I get that question all the time, like, how do you keep up with everything that's happening? Because there's so much, so rapid. And I say, well, look, you're going to be able to find people like Paul. You put out a ton of great content and videos and other things that are out there, and from your team, and you go follow people that you like and that you trust that are out there that you connect to. But there are 3 places that should be part of your, say, even daily consumption of information. One is to subscribe to the Office blog site, because that's where Microsoft pushes out their press releases, where they talk about new features, and it will go through a bunch of different channels, but it all comes down to that Office blog. Number 2 is the tech community, because that's where you have the rank and file at every level. They're in there having conversations, and they are watching and responding. I don't think I've ever commented without having feedback within a day, either directly back to me or within the tech community.
exactly.
Then the third thing, as you said, is user voice.
Yeah. And what I did is for myself, I created a flow. And this flow is, I don't know if you know RSS Mix. It's a RSS feeder, only it pushes all RSS feed into one.
Really?
So what happens is I have all tech community blogs, the Office blogs, and the Microsoft blogs in one feed.
Oh, have you blogged on this yet? Have you written about it?
No, I haven't.
You need to send me the information, because that was something that would save a ton of time to have that and forward that over. There's various tools that I use to kind of track things that are happening through social platforms, but anything that can help automate that would be fantastic.
I will create a blog on it and awesome. I will send it to you. Yeah, excellent. Definitely.
No, people love that. In fact, just so you're aware, the next CollabTalk Tweet Jam topic that we're going to be doing later this month is on that subject matter. So you'll see that here today or tomorrow.
I have to attend. Yeah, that's great.
I know there's a lot. So how long now, Paul, have you been an MVP? How long has it been? So long. How long has it been?
1 year.
1 year. Woo. So Paul is a great example of one of those people that for a couple of years, and we talk about this all the time. Like, I just had assumed you already were an MVP.
Yeah. A lot of people.
Yeah. And so I had the same thing when I've been 7 years now, and remember having conversations back in 2010 and 2011, and people was like, well, how long have you been an MVP? I'm like, I'm not an MVP. And I had enough interaction that I had, one very well-known MVP, Todd Baginski, who submitted my name into the system, and a few other people that jumped on and supported that. And in January 2012, that happened. So, you're one of those people that I'm just, we had that conversation, and I know a bunch of other people put your name in as well, but I was one of those. And so I was really happy to see that you got your MVP. So well-deserved.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I really feel honored to be one. And it all started actually also in 2009. Waldeck was already MVP then. And he took me with him during that conference and introduced me to a lot of people. Yep. So it's a big thank to Waldeck as well.
Yeah, no, it is great. And I would say that I think that's a great point to kind of end on too, is those, whether you're going to the SharePoint Conference North America happening in May, or you're planning on attending like the European Collab Summit happening the week after in May. That's another going to be a big event that's in Mainz, Germany, or attending the European SharePoint Conference that's happening in November, or Ignite, any of these huge conferences like that. But certainly the ones that are SharePoint centric, which we have our bias, of course. But there's going, and the content is fantastic. That's always you go and you learn a ton. But I tell you, you cannot replace the interactions that you have and the connections that you make.
They are the most important. They bring the value to you, and they will bring you on further on, because you get the chance to interact, ask questions, suggest answers, everything.
Yeah. And Paul, and with that, the other thing I would say is that never be shy about reaching out to an MVP, because MVPs are generally there because we are very connected. We're happy to, if we don't know the answer, we can point you to somebody that we do know, but you have to start by reaching out and connecting with us. Paul, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, they can on several ways, but the fastest way is Twitter. My Twitter handle is @KBWorks. And what I also do, I just want to tell, is when I follow my RSS feeds, I will tweet, and most of the time I will add via, for example, Buckley Planet.
Yeah.
So I've tweeted you, and that brings also value to it. Next to that, on LinkedIn, Paul Keijzers, that's also findable. I'm not that much more in Facebook at this moment, but Instagram I am. So, and on conferences, please come to me and ask questions.
Right. Well, and I'll provide the contact information as well in a related blog post. But Paul, really appreciate your time today. It's great as always catching up, and I'm trying to think when I'm going to see you next. It might not be until Ignite this fall.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get back over your direction since you won't be in Vegas next month. But I've got just a bunch of travel that's planned to other parts of the world before I make my way back over to Europe. But I'm sure I'll see you soon enough.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, have a great day. Talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.